They say, silence is sacred in a library, a space for quiet contemplation and study. But in this library, silence isn't a rule, it's a curse. In a forgotten corner of the city, shrouded in fog and memory, stands the St. Verena Public Library. It was shuttered over 50 years ago, its doors locked, its stories sealed within. The locals whispered tales about it, stories of those who dared to trespass, seeking adventure or lost knowledge. They say those who entered never came out speaking again, their voices stolen by the suffocating quiet within. Ethan, a young historian, had heard the rumors, of course, tales of disembodied whispers that weave between the towering shelves, of ancient books that bleed ink like open wounds. But for him, curiosity was always a more potent force than fear. He was chasing a ghost, a single, elusive volume mentioned only in obscure texts, the Index of the Dead, and tonight, that chase led him here, to the decaying steps of St. Verena. The wind howled through cracks in the foundation, a mournful song accompanying the creak of the ancient door. Moonlight, weak and watery, filtered through grimy, broken windows, illuminating a world of rot and decay. The air was thick with the scent of wet paper and time itself. He didn't know it yet, but the library had been waiting for him. He moved deeper inside, his small lantern casting dancing shadows that seemed to twist and writhe at the edges of his vision. The main reading hall was a cathedral of neglect. Dust-covered books, their spines broken, were piled high like funeral pyres. The shelves stretched into an oppressive darkness, seeming endless, a labyrinth of forgotten words. Ethan placed his lantern on a large oak desk, its surface scarred with the history of 1,000 readers. At first, everything seemed still, locked in a state of suspended decay. It was a tomb, nothing more. But then, a subtle wrongness pricked at the back of his mind. He scanned the room, and his blood ran cold. Every single book on every table, every tome left carelessly on a chair, was open to the exact same page, page 77. He picked one up, his hand trembling slightly. Written on the page, not in ink, but in a rust-colored stain that looked horrifyingly like dried blood, was a single, chilling command: do not read aloud. He tried to dismiss it, his rational mind fighting against the primal fear coiling in his gut. It had to be a prank, a cruel joke left by a previous trespasser. Shaking his head, he sought out the card catalog, hoping to find a clue to the location of the Index of the Dead. He finally found a reference and made his way into the stacks, locating an old, leather-bound book that matched the description. He sat down, his heart thudding against his ribs. He began to read a passage, his voice a small, hesitant sound in the cavernous silence. But as the words left his lips, the silence didn't just break, it shifted. It became a presence. It felt heavy, attentive, as if the very air had leaned in to listen. The dust motes in his lantern beams stopped their gentle dance. It was as if the library itself was holding its breath, and a cold whisper, seeming to come from both his left and his right, slithered into his ears. Keep reading, you found us. A shadow shifted at the far end of the long hallway. It was tall and impossibly thin, a flicker of movement where there should have been none. The shadow coalesced, taking the faint shape of a woman. She wore the tattered, moth-eaten uniform of an old librarian, her face pale and indistinct, her eyes to pools of darkness with no pupils. The city records said the last librarian, Elara, had died within these walls 50 years ago, a victim of her own obsession, but her soul, it seemed, had never clocked out. It remained, a spectral guardian of the forbidden knowledge she protected in life. Ethan opened his mouth to call out, to scream, but the air caught in his throat. No sound emerged. He tried again, a desperate, silent gasp. His voice was gone, plucked from him, as if it were a physical thing. All he could hear was his own frantic heartbeat, and a soft, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very walls around him. Panic seized him. He stumbled back, knocking over a stack of books. As they hit the floor, they didn't just fall, they shook. Pages began to flip with a furious, unnatural speed, a whirlwind of paper and forgotten ink. The books on the shelves trembled, then slammed shut in a deafening, echoing chorus. Dark, inky shadows began to crawl from the pages, slithering across the floor and up the walls, forming letters. They wrote his name, over and over. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. Every book began to whisper, their voices overlapping into a cacophony of madness. They weren't whispering fiction, they were whispering final words. last thoughts, the dying screams of all the others who had come before, their voices now bound to the paper and ink forever. He ran, he sprinted through the endless, shifting corridors, but every turn led him right back to the central reading hall, where the spectral librarian watched him with her hollow eyes. The light from his lantern flickered wildly, threatening to plunge him into absolute darkness with every frantic step. The whispers were a chant now, a unified, horrifying mantra that echoed with his pounding footsteps. Silence is sacred. Silence is sacred. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs felt like lead. The shelves seemed to lean in, the walls themselves bending and warping around him. Then, through the suffocating darkness, he saw it, a faint, ethereal glow. The exit door, hope, fragile and desperate, surged through him as the whispers grew louder, more demanding. Leave your voice behind, join us. He was found the next morning, huddled against the library's sealed outer door. He was alive, but his eyes were wide with a terror that would never leave him. He was trembling, and he was mute. His voice was gone forever, another trophy for the library's collection. The police found his notebook lying open on the steps beside him. On the final page, one line was written over and over again, the pencil strokes deep and frantic, tearing through the paper. The library speaks only in silence. Inside the quiet halls of St. Verena, a single page turned in a forgotten book, and a new, faint whisper joined the chorus. Thank you for joining us on this descent into the stacks. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next tale. Stay safe, and whatever you do, be careful what you read.